Hey guys, I'm Dr. Kim Sage, and it will serve as part 3 of my video series on boundaries that I never posted because the video I made didn't turn out great and I kept pushing it to the back of the line to make. So here it is. This video is really for those of you, any of you really, who have someone in your life who is not easy to deal with when it comes to boundaries. And I made this video series really for those of you who have loved ones or parents or partners in your life who may be on the borderline spectrum, the narcissistic spectrum, but you don't need any kind of diagnosis to know that some people don't accept boundaries well. And I do find that with certain types of difficulties and struggles, setting boundaries is often difficult, mostly because those who have the greatest difficulties often did not set boundaries with you, let's say in a parent, and so therefore they weren't modeled. In fact, boundaries were often just completely plowed over, right? It's like, what boundary? I can say and do whatever I want. And because of the complicated nature of often adult, child, and parent dynamics, you've been in that role as a child for so long that you feel like, I just can't do it. It's just going to upset him or her. It's going to make things worse. I don't want to deal with the aftermath. And yet you are the one, as I always say, you're the one holding all of the unhappiness and negative emotions, and you take the hit because you'd rather just swallow it and feel bad about yourself and walk away sad or angry. But most of you who, myself included, want to heal our lives, we have to change certain things. And I would say that setting boundaries is probably one of the most important to our mental health and relationships and well-being. So really quickly before I get started though, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell, and that way you'll get notified when I post new videos. As always too, please feel free to post and share your thoughts, because I really do know it helps us all not feel so alone. Even when these are tough conversations to have sometimes, even when it feels like we're labeling or stigmatizing, which I want to be clear, that is never my intention. But I also want to bring to the light what it looks like to often be on the receiving end of these difficult issues. So I will say this, number one, before I get into number one, actually, in the beginning, let me just say this sort of pre-advice. Know that it will be hard oftentimes because you often didn't have boundaries modeled for you. That as much as you're setting the boundary for this other parent or partner, you're also learning the process with yourself. And so have compassion for all of you in the process. Know that it takes time. Know that I often say to patients, and they usually, laugh, but I say, when you set a boundary, people don't say, oh, well, thank you so much. I am so glad you brought that up. Let me just change that for you and make it right. I mean, sometimes they do, but oftentimes it's a pushing back. Like, what are you talking about? Why are you being so hardcore now? Let it go. You're being so rigid. They often don't embrace the boundaries, so it can take some time. So you should know that, especially with some difficult personality types, they're going to enlist others to tell you that you're being too harsh upon them. They might try to turn others against you in this boundary setting. They might actively, and you should expect it, initially reject or feel hurt or wounded by your boundary. And it can become about you making it okay for them instead of being what you want it to be for you. And lastly, you should know that you do not need to justify your need to set a boundary with anyone. You might need to be able to explain it, as in, Mom, when you call me every day, although I love talking to you, I often feel stressed and overwhelmed, or I neglect other responsibilities, or I feel like you're really struggling and it's hard for me to hold your difficult feelings every day. And so I'm trying to set up healthier ways of living my life and also keeping our relationship. That's an example, right? But you don't have to just justify to the nth degree about why it's not okay and how it hurts you. You can explain it, but don't get stuck in the loop of having to constantly explain or justify that. If it's something that feels right for you, that you really do want to trust that, okay? So that's the pre-advice. Number one is to identify what the boundaries are that you want to change. For example, too many phone calls, negative talk about your father or stepfather or your kids, or a parent talking badly to your kids about you, or drinking too much in front of your kids, or buying them things like excessively that you don't feel comfortable with. So you want to identify what the boundary is so you're clear about, what you want to implement. And if you're not sure, I always say, be a detective. Look for where you feel resentful. Where do you get yourself sort of emotionally charged after something happens or while it's happening? That's often a clue to a place that you're letting, too much boundary violation occur towards you, and you haven't been able to set that sort of healthier gate between you and the situation. The number 2 is to identify how they are trying to violate the boundary. So are they using it to justify something that they think, well, I'm just a grandmother, I get to buy things, right? It's like, yeah, but you don't get to determine everything that happens in our lives just because you're a grandparent. Or do they sort of make you feel guilty, or do they shame you or get mad at you? Try to identify how they push back. So you're very clear about what the boundary is, and number 1, and how they are doing that to try to make it okay for you, so you can pinpoint that if you need to. For example, just because you're the grandparent and you want to lavish our children with gifts, we feel strongly that your emotion is valid, that you want to spoil them, and we know that you love them, but we have a more distinct picture about how we want to raise our kids to appreciate things. And so we'd like you to, reduce it from a toy every week to a toy once a month, or during holidays or vacations or things like that. So identify the emotion and sort of how you feel almost kind of manipulated, although it's often not intentional for many people. They just feel so compelled to do things, they often don't realize that they are offloading their negative emotion on you or setting up some kind of dynamic that you're not okay with. So identify what the feelings are, how it's happening, the emotions around it, and what it is. The third thing is to know that you cannot control everything. You can only enforce boundaries on things with which you have control. And so oftentimes with certain childhoods, we love to control because we had no control in childhood. And so to be fair to some other people who struggle, we can go too far in being too rigid. But for the most part, know that you are allowed to control what you need to control as it revolves around your own life. And then that circle of your own life is the only thing you can control. So I can't control if you are the grandmother, let's say, and you are buying gifts for my brother's kids to excess, but he's not speaking up for the issue. I can't control that. I can only control my relationship with you, right? Or a partner or whatever. Think of it that way. You don't have to keep justifying, like I said in the beginning, whatever it is. And that when you explain something, you can say calmly with validation, I understand this is hard for you. I understand it hurts your feelings. I understand this upsets you, but it is no longer okay for you to call me names at all when we are in a disagreement. It hurts my feelings, and I don't believe it is healthy for our relationship. I understand that you're upset in those moments, but it's not okay. And if they say, well, but I've always called you names, I don't mean it or whatever, I'm just mad. I get that you're mad, but it is still not okay and it still hurts my feelings. So the first part is to just sort of, you can validate the situation with them, but you're also making it clear that you're not going to accept it, right? So another example would be, I understand that you like to have cocktails on the weekend, but when you have more than 2 drinks in front of our kids, it feels like you often call me names, or you get kind of spicy or sassy, and maybe you don't mean to, but you say things that hurt my feelings or that are inappropriate in front of the kids or to me. And so I can no longer allow you to do that, right? I get that you're having fun. I get you don't mean to be hurtful, but it still is hurtful, and it is something I need to change. So you're acknowledging that, but you don't have to continue to go back and justify and explain why it hurts your feelings, why it's not good for your kids. Like, everybody knows pretty much that getting hammered in front of your kids, is probably not a great idea. For most people, it happens sometimes, but especially if it becomes something that's unhealthy and negative. And if it's even outside of your own relationship and it's a parent or sibling or aunt or uncle, whatever, you have every right to set those boundaries. And so the first thing is to validate and identify it, and then to begin to go into the next step, which is to set up the consequence for what you will do if they continue to violate the boundary. So you would say, if you continue to do this, we won't be able to have, family dinners where alcohol is served, because it seems like it continues to happen and it's hurtful for the kids and for me, or it's not acceptable in our home and I need it to change, right? And so you're practicing that, setting up a consequence. And you might actually want to practice saying it, validating, I understand this is hard for you, but it's no longer okay. It hurts our feelings. We feel it's uncomfortable. It creates negative relationship with us. But make sure you follow through. So if you say to your parent, Mom, if you continue to do this, we can no longer have dinners on Sundays if you're if there's going to be alcohol or if you're going to behave this way. And then the next Sunday that pops up, she comes over, starts having cocktails, and you let it slide. You basically just told her that whatever you said doesn't matter. It's like with kids, right? You can threaten all day long, but at some point they stop believing you. So no matter what the consequence is, even if you say, we're on the phone, and you say, Mom, if you call me another name again, I will not be able to talk to you today. I'll have to talk to you again in the next couple of days. It hurts my feelings, and I've told you I'm not going to accept that. And she says, well, you're just being a little blah, blah, blah. Then you just say, okay, I'm going to hang up now and I'll talk to you later. You hang up the phone and you wait. You don't let her call you 50 times in the day or text you and then reinforce that behavior by calling her back. You calmly text her and say, Mom, I know this is hard for you. I know you're upset, but I'm not going to, as I told you, I will not speak to you when you talk to me like that. As I said, I will call you tomorrow. And then you do that, or I'll call you next week, whatever it is. So you can leave the situation, you can hang up the phone, you can send a text message that just says, look, I understand you're struggling, but I'm not going to be responding. This is not okay. And then if it gets extreme, you can say things like, if you do this, then I will do that. Just make sure you are clear about what you're saying and clearly follow through with whatever consequence you're setting, knowing that it's going to feel hard for you in the beginning. You're going to feel guilty and bad and maybe ashamed and like you're hurting her, and what if she gets out of control? And obviously if this parent or partner is at risk from like a suicide perspective, you need to understand that it is still not your job to save their life. You can say, if you're in danger, you need to call 911. You can make a phone call to have a welfare check or call 911. But you can't get in a cycle where they have power over you that way, because truly you cannot literally save someone's life if they decide to end it. You can be supportive, but at some point it becomes extremely dangerous for you to stay in that cycle. So that's a whole different issue in terms of suicide. I could probably make a different video on that in terms of borderline and other disorders, but just make sure that you don't fall into the trap of all of that. When that tool gets brought out, I'm going to kill myself, that then you let down all your boundaries, because if that's the actual weapon every single time, then you're never going to be able to hold a boundary, because nobody wants someone they love, even if it's complicated love, to hurt themselves. Not only follow through with consequences, but to hold yourself accountable and to get support, whether it's your therapist, your partner, your friends, knowing that, you're often going to want to just not do it because it's so hard and it can feel so bad to actually change that dynamic between you as the child or you as the partner, to take some power back, to set the boundary. And even with people who have no disorders whatsoever, most of us, we have a little shifting to do around accepting boundaries. So it's really true for those who struggle on the more extreme end of personality disorders and really mental health in general. Sometimes it can be hard because it takes resources sometimes to accept that things have to change. The last one is to just accept the reality of the situation for yourself. Try to be loving and compassionate. Try to acknowledge that it's not going to change overnight. Where I have really seen it work, especially with borderline and narcissism, with like parents, let's say, is when it's a consistent, loving, firm follow through, and the parent begins to realize that you're not abandoning them, you're just changing the rules a bit. And for many people, they don't want to lose you, and so they will make those shifts. However, that being said, if the reality is that you've tried everything, you've tried the progression, you've set the boundaries, you've tried to be loving and compassionate, deciding that you can't do it anymore is a decision that most of us don't take lightly. But it's important to know that there are limits. And so, give yourself some grace, look at it from realistic perspectives, but also be prepared to know that the goal of the boundary setting is to protect the membrane between you and really everyone else in the world. And obviously with each relationship that varies, with our kids versus our partners or our boss. But the goal is to protect yourself and to live from a more authentic place of healing. And especially if you are trying to make boundaries with a difficult parent and you're now a teen to adult, you should know that you can't control what they do. All you can do is control what you do. Be realistic, try to be firm with yourself, get support, have self-compassion, and know that it's a process. And hopefully these tools will help. Please feel free to post down below any other ideas you have, to also have grace with yourself, to know that as I keep saying, that you do not have to feel guilty for protecting yourself. You could not do it as a child or in your last relationship, whatever it is, but you have every day is a new day to start over and to protect yourself today. So I hope you will do that. So thanks for watching. Please stay safe and well. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and know that I deeply appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope you will just take good care, and I'll see you soon. Bye guys.